here from the Crimson Stitchery. This is a video channel about making all things beautiful and useful. I am recording at lunchtime on New Year's Eve here in London in the UK, wishing you a very happy New Year, as I expect that most of you will be watching this in the first week of January 2023. In this episode, I'm going to share with you a very long-standing finished object that I've been working on for ages, slowly in the background, and that recently viewers have actually been asking me about. And yes, it is finished, so I'll talk about that in a sec. And I'll also be talking about what I've been knitting over this December holiday period, because I have treated it like a holiday, which has been really lovely. And yeah, just generally reflecting on the last year. So for those of you who might be new to the channel, this is a studio vlog where I basically share everything that I've been making and thinking about, because I'm an artist and a researcher. I normally release my vlog monthly, and I'm swooping in right at the last minute of this month of December because I basically have spent most of December asleep because I had the flu. And I was ill, I was out for a full 2 weeks. I basically spent 2 weeks in bed. And then, yeah, even over the Christmas period and stuff, still wasn't really very well. And I'm so happy today is the first day that I've woken up and I haven't needed 12 to 13 hours sleep. And so finally I've got myself together to record December's vlog for you guys. And this episode, as always, is coming to you courtesy of all of my lovely and wonderful supporters over on Patreon, who keep my channel going through their monthly membership subscriptions. I rely really heavily on my Patreon supporters in order to fund this channel and continue recording videos for the Crimson Stitchery, which, as well as my monthly vlog, does include a lot of tutorials and tutorials and so on and so forth. And I also design knitting patterns. So it's really thanks to the encouragement of my supporters who have helped foster this really lively and wonderful community online over on our private Discord server, where we share projects, get tips and advice and so on, and generally just cheer each other along, that the Crimson Stitchery has grown to be a wonderful online space for many people, not just me. So if you enjoy the Crimson Stitchery and you have been considering it for a little while, do hop on over to patreon.com/The Crimson Stitchery to check out all of the different tier benefits and select the right one for you. Okay, let's get straight into it then. What is this mystery, long-standing work in progress or WIP? And anyone that's been watching my videos over 2022 and maybe that have, followed some of the tutorials or whatever, anyone who has kind of had their wits about them, you might have noticed something in the background here on the arm of my couch. And that is my log cabin scrap blanket. So I'll just grab that now. It's just been hanging out there for the past year, and it's been done for a little while. So this is it folded up into quarters. This is a long-standing scrap project that I started, I think it was at some point during the last 3 years of pandemic. I'm not sure if it was 2020 or 2021 at this point, but it was quite a while ago. For anyone that's not aware, I have been having these long-standing initiatives to work through all of my stash yarns, basically, and especially all of the scraps in my stash. And it's been, a little bit challenging at times to think of projects that can really use up those, last one ball or half a ball or 1.5 balls, that you have leftovers from sweaters, or, maybe you've made a hat and, you bought 100 grams of yarn, but you use 65 and you've got that substantial amount left over, but not enough kind of for a project in its own right. And what I realised at a certain point was that I was able to group a lot of my leftover yarns into kind of colour schemes. So, along the years at some point, I kind of grouped everything together by colour and have been trying my best to work through various different scrap projects. And this one is, quite a mammoth. It's made up of 25 log cabin squares that I've arranged in the courthouse steps pattern. So log cabin is, traditionally it comes from quilting. It's a quilting technique, but it has also been adapted to knitting and crochet, where you basically start with a central small piece and then you pick up stitches and add more along by kind of joining along the side every time. So when you do the courthouse steps technique, which is instead of a kind of spiraling formation, it kind of builds out layer by layer, and then you arrange them so that you've got half light and half dark. What it ends up forming when you put the dark ones next to each other is this kind of lanterns pattern, which I really liked, and it really reminded me of scenes in Vietnam where in central Vietnam, where people kind of hang all of these coloured lanterns outside in the town at night, and it's really beautiful. So yeah, it's funny how sort of these shapes in a way can become quite almost universal across cultures. Like, certain shapes, how symbols and patterns can kind of carry their meanings. So we've gone from like this looking like lanterns, hanging lanterns, where they have the silk outside the frame, so it's really glowing. But it's taken from a North American quilting technique and then transformed into knitting again. So I've always loved this type of interpretation of courthouse steps or log cabin. Because of this lantern thing, and for a long time I had the ambition of sewing a quilt that was in this pattern, but now instead I've knitted a blanket and it used scraps. And as you can see, I've had to, because they're scraps, I've had to be quite kind of liberal in my interpretation of colour. So this green has got a stripe of yellow, this pink has got a stripe of beige and stripe of grey, and then blue, red, navy and magenta. And orange, and most of it is done with wools, but there are some wild cards. There's a bit of cotton here and there. There's sock yarns, and I had this something's just fallen off the Christmas tree. I had this basic technique, and I wanted to just use as much as I could. So I used, I think it was 5.5 or 5 millimeter needles in the end, so around Aran weight yarn, like a heavy worsted. And a lot of the time with my yarns, I doubled them up. So I held 2 4-ply yarns together, or maybe I had a DK weight yarn that I held with a 4-ply, if it was like a thin 4-ply or lace weight, or maybe a mohair. And I just kind of chunked them all up, if you like, so that I could really get through my stash. And I remember I started off with 3 big bags full, 3 carrier bag kind of size, like grocery carrier bag sizes, and I whittled them down in the end to about half of one. So I've still not worked my way through all of my scraps. I've still got other scrap projects on. But the reason why this took so long is because obviously it's pretty big, and also, just things like joining the strips together, weaving in the ends. And then I did this big border out of a special yarn that was actually sent to me by a viewer, because it was a hand-spun kind of barber poly merino. And I did an I-cord knitted on border, so you can imagine that took quite, fair while to work, applied I-cord edging. It's kind of a coincidence, or maybe she did it on purpose, but the colours in this hand-spun yarn are the colours of my squares. So I've got like a teal, orange, navy blue, and a dusty pink. And I'm not sure, I think I have a bit of kind of like a fuchsia purple. I've got more of a fuchsia pink magenta in my blanket, but close enough. So yeah, it's got this multicoloured edging, and the edging I find really pleasing because it just ties it all together nicely. It's one of those really small details that can make quite a big difference in the finish of an item. So this blanket is, maybe like 90% wool, so it's really, really warm. It's been a wonderful thing to just throw over your legs on the evening when you're on the couch. Because it's all garter stitch as well, it's really squashy, and it's just got this really pleasing bounce, and you kind of squeeze it and it returns, squeeze and return in a way, in the way that wool does. So I'm incredibly pleased with it. It's definitely been quite a feat. It took a really long time. And yeah, so thank you to the viewers who recently, commented and said, by the way, what happened to that log cabin blanket? Because yeah, it's been finished. It's been finished for a little while. But just, every now and then you find a new end to sew in and all of that. So yeah. Put that back there. So that's the log cabin blanket. I absolutely love it, and we're definitely recommend it as a project. And, it was this technique applied to a blanket that inspired, my recent knitting design for the knit dicky that I talked about in last episode, where I used the log cabin technique, but I didn't do it all in garter stitch. I incorporated lots of different stitch patterns and textures into a dicky garment. And that's been released by Making Magazine. It's available to download through their gifts issue, which is like this bumper issue with loads of projects, and it's really gorgeous. And I can't wait to work through some projects on that when I have a moment. But I've also wondered if I should, maybe in the future when the rights revert back to me and I'm able to release the pattern under the Crimson Stitchery, I've wondered if I should just do maybe one or two very much more simple dickies as well that don't have the log cabin technique, or the other way and design more stuff with log cabin. I don't know. Let me know what you think, and if you've tried like log cabin or courthouse steps before, and how you've gotten with it. I've got a feeling that a few people might have also made these kind of scrap blankets, but I think it also worked really well in like a cushion and a scarf. And I guess it doesn't have to be rectangular as well. Like the dicky, you could add in shaping and get inventive with it. So that's my finished object, and then let me just grab my knitting basket behind me. So this last month, as I mentioned, I've had the flu, and so obviously, as usual, the best laid plans get led astray. But I'm not the only one that's had the flu. It's like made the news in the UK. Like everyone seems to have become ill, either with COVID or some other kind of virus this month, unfortunately. And just being like stuck at home, just having like little moments of lucidity, like when you're not feverish. One of the things that I did was I emptied my knitting basket, and it just collected all sorts of rubbish in it over the last year. I think kind of sometimes using it as a prop in these videos, I just kind of shove things on the top, and there were all sorts of things in it. So at the moment it's pretty full, and it's all full of things that need to be mended. But what I found this pair of pink socks, which have a hole in them. And then I found, amongst all the mess and all of the tangles and so on, I found another pink sock, which is different. It's knit in my Twister Lolly Socks pattern in this fuchsia pink Coupe Knits socks. Yeah, like one of my treasured yarns. It's not that expensive. You can knit, if you have small to medium feet, you can knit a pair of like trainer socks. We call these trainer socks in the UK, or like shorty socks, in just 150-gram ball of it. So that's what I use for my Twister Lolly Socks pattern. But I found a weird thing. So I think what had happened was that the old socks, which use the same yarn but it's a different pattern, one had got a hole, so that had gone into my mending basket and not become mended. And then it's like I wore odd socks, same yarn but different patterns, but one old and one new. And then I found like a horrible tangled mess of yarn and needles, which was like a cast on and one row of the pair of the new sock. Honestly, I thought, what is this? Why have I just knit one row and thrown it away for it just to become like a horrible tangle? So I spent quite a while like untangling it. That's like a good activity when you're sick. And then very quickly in the end knit up the second sock. So I've got to sew in the ends. But I'm really pleased. Now I can tell that the colour is blowing out on screen because it is so bright, and that's the thing with these fluorescent colours. They don't they don't always photograph easily. But it's my Twister Lolly Socks pattern, so it's got the twisted rib calf, a lovely rib and lace pattern down the foot, and then it's got this ribbed toe. So I finished that. I need to sew in the ends, as I say, and that just felt like a really quick win, because being a trainer sock, it's only really like 2/3 of a sock, because you basically cast on, knit for 1 inch, and then you're doing the heel. So then, also in the pile of mess, I found some of this yarn, which is, again, it's leftovers, so it's around maybe 40 grams at a guess, I'm just guessing. And it's left over from my Wafer Crunch Socks pattern. So again, it's another really gorgeous yarn. Both this yarn and the last one I did recommend on my video of my top 10 sock yarns that I released a little while ago. There's a link to it on screen now where I talk about it in depth. So this one was Travel Knitter. I think it's called Super Sock or something like that. So it's a BFL and polyamide nylon blend, I believe. And it's hand-dyed in London, and it's incredibly rich. Most of her yarns, I think all of her yarns are like solid, semi-solid, semi-tonal yarns. And it's just such a pleasurable experience to knit with. And it's this, amazing true violet kind of colour. And I think it was the artist... Freddie, I'll put her name on screen, who I listened to a podcast. So she's an artist. She works a lot with knit and with textiles and, kind of is a sort of sculptor in a way. And I listened to a podcast where she was being interviewed, and she said that knitting is a way of spending time with a colour. And I thought that was so apt, and she put it so succinctly. So I'll put the interview down below if you're interested in hearing about an approach to knit as a sort of medium from an artist, from a visual artist. So yeah, I really feel like this when I use this type of hand-dyed yarn. You're really spending time with a colour, and so I had earmarked this, I felt like I knit the sock sample a while ago, in 2020, the Wafer Crunch socks. And then I felt like I had quite a substantial little wodge of leftover yarns for quite a while. So I'd earmarked it to make, again, a pair of Twister Lolly socks, because it's just like, I don't know what it is about this pair of socks. I feel like it's really successful. Something to do with the stitch pattern means it both fits really nicely between the rib and the lace, and it's quite fun to work up and knit. And then it's got little challenges like, the toe is ribbed, for instance. But you don't have to do that. You could just have a plain toe. You could have a more straightforward heel if you wanted to. Very easy to swap out. And and then because not that I'm going to be giving too much away, but basically the stitch pattern has an odd number in it, in the repeat. And a lot of the time in knitting, they go for, most designers go for even numbers because it makes it easy to calculate. So I think that's why in this case, sometimes it's definitely worth buying patterns for things that, could be simple. You could do it yourself, but actually sometimes you just let someone else have done the number crunching for you. So that was me. I did that for you, the number crunching. But anyway, so I thought, because I whipped up my second pink sock so quickly, I thought, let me just finish this other plan that I made, like at this point, 2 years ago, 3 years ago at this point, 2.5 years ago, and let's just get that done and dusted. So I could have done the sensible thing, which would have been to weigh my leftover ball and wind it off into 2 separate balls and then knit 1 sock from each. But, I just didn't do that. So what I did instead was I decided to work the sock 2 at a time. And I did that just by knitting them on separate pairs of needles and just making sure that, after I knit a few repeats on one, I'd knit a few repeats on the other so that I could see roughly how much I had left. And then what I'm going to do is I'm not going to stripe, I'm not going to do a ribbed toe, I'm just going to stripe it with some other leftover yarn. And I found some kind of dusty, this is a self-striping dusty lilac and blue, as you can see. So I think if that, once they're striped together, I think they'll look perfectly fine. And yeah, again, they just knit up really quickly. So I did this over Christmas. And then with this pattern, again, you start off, you work the heel, you get it out of the way very quickly, and then you're just going round and round on the foot. And then they're pretty much done. So I think that they are almost ready to have their toes put in. And I will enjoy doing that maybe on New Year's Day and have just another little quick win, a tick off the old list, and just kind of, draw a line under an old plan, because I don't know about you, but I feel like my problem, if you like, with knitting can be that I have too many ideas and too many plans, and just there's a lot of things that are half started, or there's a lot of old ideas that float around that I'm not ready to let go of yet, because they still are good ideas, but they just mount up and become overwhelming. And then on that note, I was thinking that maybe I would do a bit of an audit, if you like, of my current works in progress, including pattern designs, because there's so many. And maybe go through those and make a video about that. So let me know if you're interested in that, maybe, early on in this new year. And I was also thinking about possibly doing another whip along, which is what I did, right at the beginning of the Crimson Stitchery. We had a whip along. I think it went on for about 4 months or 6 months even. I think 6 months is a good time where we can just kind of gather together online and spur each other on to finish some more works in progress and kind of get them out there. Because I used to be much better. I think I go in phases, of being quite strict about just having 1 or 2 projects at a time, let's say 1 to 3, like maybe a sock, a larger, more long-term project, and then maybe the sock's something easy, and then I've got something I need to think about, and then maybe something like a third thing that I just need to finish, or so maybe like a sock, sweater, and a blanket, that kind of thing, or a sock and a sweater and another sweater that I need to just like do the last few bits on. And that's like when everything's kind of in control. And then other times everything just sort of mushrooms, spirals, grows on its own accord. And I am not really keeping tabs on things as well as I should. And I'd really love to run another community endeavour with you guys in 2023. I'm not used to that yet. I'll get used to it soon. But that's it, really. So let me know what you think about doing another whip along. Would you be interested? Should we should we do it on Instagram? Should we do it on Ravelry? Where would you like to gather for that? Let me know, and maybe if it's popular, maybe I'll run a poll or something like that on YouTube. So keep an eye out for that from me. So that's all of the knitting content that I've got to share with you. So that's all of the knitting that I've got to share with you guys today. As I said, I have sadly been out for the count for the majority of this month. And when I, look back and reflect on 2022, it was a time for sort of finding ways of recuperation and rebuilding. And honestly, if I think back, I feel like I spent a lot of the year lying down half asleep, but actually I was still, on paper, really productive. I released 5 new knitting patterns. So at the beginning of the year, we had the Matariki Winter Solstice collaboration with Aroha Knits. So I did a shawl and a pair of fingerless gloves. I had 2 designs that I had published by, external other companies. So I had Kolsch hat with Hudson and West Co., a lovely little cabled beanie with a lot of interest, and then at the end of the year, I had the Knit Dicky with Making Magazine that I mentioned, and I also released my first sweater, which was a collaboration with Black Isle Yarns, the Sicimbrium sweater, which is still available, by the way, to download as a perk on Patreon if you sign up to the 2nd tier and above. Just saying. So yeah, I did all of that. I, did loads of work on my thesis, and then I, unexpectedly ended up having this artist residency opportunity. And so, yeah, it's sometimes I think it's important to look back and kind of spell things out and reflect. And I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people that tends to be much nicer to other people than myself. And then, so if you can kind of step back and lay it out and really see what happened, I think it's much easier to be nicer to yourself and proud of what you've achieved. So I think, yeah, for me personally, 2022, it's been another weird year, not a normal year. But there's definitely been a lot to celebrate within it, and I am looking forward to 2023 with some anticipation, with a little bit of trepidation. This is the year where I actually have to submit my thesis, my PhD thesis. This is it. This is the end of the line. I have to do it this year. I still have more plans for the Crimson Stitchery. I have lots of designs that have been on the back burner that I have, for university-related reasons that I want to work on, and I just want to carry on making things and sharing them with you guys and hosting really great conversations, as I feel privileged to be able to do so, and I feel privileged to sort of have this space online where sort of critical thinking and intellectual philosophies and creativity are just immediately woven together. They're not separated, and people are very open-minded as well to hear me and my ramblings as I put it. But I feel like, we don't put each other in boxes in this space, and it feels very, very generous. So thank you very much for being with me for the Crimson Stitchery for the last year. I'm really looking forward to the next year ahead. Let me know what you think about the whip along, and let me know what you're making in this first week of January 2023. Before I go, I would like to say one more thank you to everybody who has supported me over the last year financially, whether that's by joining us on Patreon or by giving a one-off tip over on Ko-fi.com. Links are below if anyone is interested in chipping in. Your contributions have honestly kept the lights on for the Crimson Stitchery, so thank you so much. And especially a shout out to my supporters at the Crimson Queens tier, which is the highest level on Patreon. Thank you so much, Angie Scheitel, for your support. With all of that said and done, Happy New Year, cheers, and see you at the Crimson Stitchery again sometime soon. Take care, bye.